Hi, good to see you too. How are you doing?
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Jen. Hello.
Okay, so we are thrilled to have a very special guest with us today on Jobs Day. A remarkable Jobs Day it is. Dr. Cecilia Rouse, Chair of the Council of Economic Advisors. Because we're running a bit late, she has a very small window, but has agreed to take a few questions and also to come back. And then we will have a briefing as long as we can. And for those of you in the pool, we will keep you updated as well. So with that, I'll turn it over.
Good afternoon. So I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about today's job report, as this is a bright spot and a sign of our strong labor market recovery over the past year. The February jobs report is extremely solid. The economy added 678,000 jobs in February, well above market expectations. Revisions to the prior 2 months added over 90,000 more jobs than originally reported, with an average monthly gain of 582,000 over the past 3 months. Other data demonstrate our strong economic rebound. The unemployment rate ticked down to 3.8%, and the labor force participation rate ticked up, reaching a new pandemic high. Since President Biden took office, the economy created 7.4 million jobs. This includes the greatest single year of job growth in American history and the fastest economic growth in almost 40 years. This month's report reflects broad-based growth. For example, the unemployment rate for workers with less than a high school degree is the lowest on record. And employment in all major industries either grew or held steady. Last year, the economy created more manufacturing and trucking jobs than any year since 1994. While the care industry is still behind the overall labor market in terms of its recovery, we saw meaningful increases in nursing and residential care, child care, and state and local government, which is often schools. Notably, this month also saw the largest over-the-month increase in employment in home health care on record. These are important components in helping those with care responsibilities get back to work. We look at the prime age labor force because it is less affected by long-run changes in educational attainment or by the natural slowdown as people age and retire. This month, the employment rate for workers aged 25 to 54 rose, part of a relatively consistent rise. Overall, the recovery from the pandemic recession has been faster than any of the past recessions. For instance, in 2021, job growth averaged 562,000 jobs per month, nearly 3 times faster than from 2011 to 2019, the years following the Great Recession. The share of the labor force experiencing long-term unemployment or involuntary part-time work has fallen dramatically in the pandemic recovery, in part due to the investments of the American Rescue Plan. Both of these measures were often sources of scarring after an economic downturn, which describes conditions where workers suffer economic impacts for substantial time after the recession ends. For instance, after the Great Recession, the long-term unemployment rate reached 4.4%, but did not fall to 1% until 2017, about 7 years later than it reached its peak. From January to February of this year, the long-term unemployment rate held steady, but overall has dropped during the pandemic recovery from a high of 2.6%. We also know that one way scarring can affect workers is through increasing share of workers who cannot get all the hours that they want because they cannot find a full-time job or because business conditions are weak. But similar to the long-term unemployment rate, this measure has seen rapid recovery. The percent of the labor force that is working part-time for economic reasons ticked up in February to 2.5%, but remains below its level in February 2020. Monthly employment and unemployment data can be volatile, and payroll estimates can be subject to substantial revisions. Therefore, it's important to focus on trends rather than data in a single month, which is what the administration stresses every month. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Trevor.
You've seen a fairly substantial slide in the stock market this year. We've seen rising oil prices. Those are obviously pressures on the economy. Do you think that if those trends continue, that they will reverse the gains that you've seen?
So I think it's important to separate the stock market from the real economy. And the growth that we've seen in the real economy has been the fastest in almost 40 years. We've seen job growth that is historically fast. Obviously we are monitoring the financial sector. The actions of the Federal Reserve play a key role there, and obviously the tensions and the invasion of Russia of Ukraine is having an impact there. So we are monitoring, we are impacting, but quite honestly, we go into 2022 from a position of economic strength strength. The bones of this economy are strong and has the resilience to weather what is ahead of us in this year ahead.
Understanding that, excuse me, data is fluid and volatile right now, but given the strength that the U.S. economy has, how long can it withstand the spikes we've seen in commodities, just the general environment, before the threat of tipping into a recession becomes real at this point?
So, look, the economy is very strong. What we saw in February was that we added almost 700,000 jobs over the month as the cases of Omicron were coming down, but did not get down to zero. So what we saw was the resilience in this economy, that we were able to continue the recovery as we're also learning to live alongside of this pandemic and safely get back to our normal lives. So we are optimistic if we continue. The president we have the tools. The president has asked for Congress to have additional tools, which we know are going to be so important as the pandemic is not over, but we know we have the therapeutics, we have the resources to develop vaccines quickly. We've got masking. We have the tools to navigate the pandemic as we go forward. So we are optimistic that we can continue this robust recovery. This president has an economic plan to grow this economy from the bottom up, middle out. It's premised on, making the key investments in this economy that have not been made over decades. So the bipartisan infrastructure law was a key component of that, and there are components of his, what were parts of Build Back Better, which is the, child tax credit, which is investments in children, paid leave, which help people balance work and home responsibilities, helping people get back to work and balance their care responsibilities, lowering costs for families, whether it's in prescription drugs, childcare costs that have been increasing for decades and that are so important to this economy. So this president is focused on that kind of economic investments, which are premised on increasing our economic capacity, which is the kind of sustainable economic growth that we're looking to see.
Kelly?
Given the good news that you just mentioned and the trend lines, which have been very, very positive, why do you think this president is not getting credit from voters for steering the economy in the right direction?
Well, I think that's a really complicated question. We know that the American Rescue Plan was really an insurance policy for this economy. What we know is that there are millions more families. We created, the economy created 7.4 million jobs over the past year during this presidency. And so we know millions of families are able to, have a job and put food on the table and pay their bills. What we know in the confidence data, a lot of that is premised on inflation. And we do have inflation. The president has acknowledged that. We understand that. He is focused on that. But what people also report is that their own finances are fairly healthy, but they see the kind of uncertainty in the economy that is there. So we're a pandemic-scarred society. That's not just the economy. There's uncertainty as we navigate our way out of this pandemic, and then the tensions between Russia and Ukraine are going to add to that uncertainty as well.
As you described the strength in the economy, if there were a policy decision made to stop importing Russian oil, what impact would that have? And do you see a resilience in the American economy to withstand that?
So again, we're in a very good position. What we know is that, from the U.S. economy, we don't import a lot of Russian oil, but we are looking at options that we can take right now if we were to cut the U.S. consumption of Russian energy. But what's really most important is that we maintain a steady supply of global energy.
Last one, Josh.
Sorry, just to follow up on that, we're reporting right now that you are considering a ban on U.S. imports of Russian crude. Should I interpret your answer just now that it might be more targeted than that?
So we are considering a range of options, but what's really essential is that we maintain a steady supply of global energy. We don't want to disrupt. Look, energy is a global market, and we do not want to disrupt that market.
And on today's report, the jobs number was great. The wage growth is pretty sluggish. I'm wondering, is that normal to expect a disconnect there? Does one typically follow the other? And what do you draw from that? How can you get wages to keep pace with the actual job numbers themselves?
So from month to month, data can be volatile. And so that's why we don't focus on month-to-month changes, especially in wages. But we did see robust growth even for lower wage industries, and we know that over the year wages are up. But the president's economic plan is really about having increases in wages that are sustained by increases in productivity, and they're really premised on the increase in the economic capacity, and that help families by lowering costs on those, in those areas, healthcare, prescription care, childcare, that we know have been really squeezing pocketbooks over several decades.
Thank you, Dr. Rouse, for joining us.
Thank you.
Welcome anytime.